Well, my hardest NES games video ended up doing very well, so apparently my audience really likes torture. Well, if that's what you want, then it's time for another CBT session. The Super Nintendo really was an upgrade in quality from the NES in pretty much all aspects. From graphics to sound palette to gameplay, all of it was made better with the new additions. Difficulty also made the jump from the NES, and in some cases, added some extra pain. And like before, I'm gonna list a few of the particular ones that will give you an ulcer. As a reminder, this list is just a sample, so if you were bullied by something not on here, it's completely valid. These are the games that, through either history or trial, have caused intense emotions to boil up inside of me. In no particular order, here are 10 of the hardest Super Nintendo games. So, disclaimer, a group of games on this list are going to be sequels to games that I highlighted in the NES video. This isn't like a legacy hire or anything. These games are just legitimately very hard still. Ghosts 'n Goblins on the NES was a very challenging platformer that was infamous for having to be beaten twice to get a true ending. And I'm very happy, sarcasm, to report the sequel continues the tradition with some extra pain thrown in. Super Ghouls and Ghosts was released on the Super Nintendo in 1991 by Capcom. You once again control Arthur, who must again save the princess from the demon emperor Bowser. I mean Sardius. Arthur must venture across 8 different levels, slaying zombies, devils, and other such baddies with his wide variety of weapons and armor. New to this game is the double jump, which when used right can help you get out of sticky situations or reach previously unreachable platforms. When used wrong, you'll jump right into an enemy or an instant death trap. You can't redirect yourself after you do the double jump, so you're left at the mercy of whatever lies at your feet. New weapons, attacks, and the gold armor come to help you this time around, but everything still breaks in one hit, so you better mind your movement before the end bosses do it for you. The game is difficult again in the first loop because of the relentless enemies and platforming, and having to do an even harder loop just to see a proper end of the game will drive you up the wall and double jump right off of it. Another sequel from the NES. You hear Battletoads and you already know what you're in for. Pain, lost lives, broken controllers. And to your benefit, this game fully succeeds in that regard. Battletoads and Battlemaniacs was released in 1993 for the Super Nintendo by Rare, though a port was also released for the Master System in 1996. In this game, the daughter of an important CEO and Zitz are kidnapped by the pigs and the Dark Queen inside a virtual reality game world, so Rash and Pimple must go in after them and kick butt. Gameplay is similar to the previous game, in which you beat up all the enemies on the screen to proceed to the next, with a boss waiting for you at the end. Final attacks are even more elaborate, making the action that much more satisfying to perform. But this is Battletoads. It isn't just a beat 'em up section. You also have your vertical scroller sections with numerous instant death traps. And in case that hasn't made you mad enough, here come the Turbo Bike section that drain your lives and continues. This isn't your standard Turbo Bike though. This is your even faster, even harder to control Turbo Bike. The amount of times I've gotten to this level without even losing a life just to completely crash out could feed families. And this is still early on in the game. You still have loads of levels of pain to go. If you want a challenge on the Super Nintendo, go somewhere else, cause the broken TV replacement bill isn't worth it. The Lion King was released in 1994 for the Super Nintendo, Genesis, DOS, Amiga, Game Boy, and the NES by Westwood Studios and Virgin Interactive. The scourge of 90s babies' childhood. You would expect a video game adaptation of a Disney movie made for kids to be simple, somewhat mundane. Nope, this game is brutal and not afraid to cause you trouble. You control Simba, first in child form, then in adult form in the second half of the game, as he makes his way across the savannah, across different levels, platforming across jungle environments, and defeating various animals including hyenas? If Simba could do this as a child in the movie, it would be a much shorter movie. Anyway, this game is notorious for its platforming, with one level in particular being a thorn in everyone's backside. The second level, titled I Can't Wait to Be King, is a complete roadblock in terms of kids trying to progress through the game. The level is essentially part puzzle and part twitchy horizontal scroller with Simba needing to scream at monkeys. Yes, that makes sense if you play the game, to get them to throw him in the right direction. These are between the sections of level where you ride an ostrich to avoid barely visible obstacles, and the horrible platforming sections where you ride hippos with swinging tails. All of these combine to make the most unbearable level possible. Most people who own this game aren't even aware there is more after that level, and that's not kind as well. When you attract the reputation that this game had in the 90s in a pre-internet age, you know you're working with something vastly unpleasant. Want Castlevania 4 on the Super Nintendo, but even more cruel to the point where you want to cry at your TV screen? Boy, do we have the game for you. Castlevania Dracula X was released on the Super Nintendo in 1995 by Konami. This game is a port of the original PC Engine release, Castlevania Rondo of Blood in 1993, and is followed by the direct sequel game, Castlevania Symphony of the Night on PS1. You control Richter Belmont before his adventures in that game, as he must whip his way across different levels to save the captives and defeat Dracula. Due to the difference in technology, many things that had to be adjusted in the port, including different gameplay elements and new levels. What didn't get adjusted is the difficulty level. Unlike Super Castlevania 4, which was also released on the Super Nintendo, there is no 8-way directional whip, so hitting enemies is a lot harder in this game, which complements nicely with the increased amount of enemies heading towards you. Rondo of Blood also included game saves, which was replaced by a password system in this game. This will come back to haunt you when the platforming causes you to game over again and again and again. The platforming in Castlevania games is already not ideal, so having to scale this horrendous level design mixed in with instant death hits and erratic flying enemies is pure torture. While Castlevania 4 is the proper sequel to the NES trilogy, Dracula X could be considered a successor in terms of sharing the difficulty of the original games. Zombies Ate My Neighbors was released in 1993 for the Super Nintendo and Genesis by LucasArts and Konami. Despite its goofy title, this game is awesome. An overhead top-down run and gun, you control two kids as they go through level after level in a variety of different environments, killing zombies, ghouls, and various other creatures while saving their NPC neighbors before they get got. You can get a variety of weapons and items to help you on your way, like a water gun, soda can bombs, and even a bazooka. The challenge of each level is to make it to the various neighbors before the monsters reach them, in which case they are gone from then on. Being completely serious, you start out with 10 neighbors and must collect them all to move on to the next level, and if you lose any, they don't immediately come back. Difficulty then becomes getting through each of the 48 levels without losing all of your neighbors, in which case you immediately game over. You can get neighbors back by scoring enough points, but that will require you to continuously murder the undead and not get hit yourself. Enemies can easily swarm you and drain your health and lives, leading to a deeply frustrating game over. With the amount of lives in this game, you would think the password system would come in handy, but you also weigh not having the opportunity to get as much pickups in the later levels, which could screw you over when you come to a boss monster. While this game should be experienced, I warn you to be on your A game to avoid certain doom. Cyber Ninja breakdance fighting? What's not to love about this game? Well, the coronary for one, Hagane, the final conflict, was released on the Super Nintendo in 1994 by CA Production and Hudson Soft. You control Hagane, a futuristic ninja cyborg, as he platforms across multiple levels using all the tools in his repertoire to eliminate all the enemies in his way in the name of revenge against the clan that nearly killed him and his family. These tools include his sword, shuriken, bombs, and a grapple hook. Each have their own directional arcs and availability, but all will come in handy to prevent Hagane from turning into scrap metal. Hagane can also maneuver their way up walls and dash in midair to avoid destruction, which gives the enemies the green light to spam projectiles. Not even kidding, the enemies will rain objects against you if they aren't charging you themselves, and you can only take 3 hits initially until you can pick up health extending pickups. 3 straight hits without grabbing a health pickup, and Hagane gets put on a t-shirt. Once all your lives are gone, you gotta use a continue, and any checkpoints you reach are now void. And once all your continues are gone, that's it. Honestly, the game is pretty underrated. It's a fun platformer with cool mechanics, and didn't I mention you're a freaking cyborg ninja? I can only surmise that the only reason this game isn't more popular is because curious people who check it out don't make it far due to the difficulty curve. A shame too, as this game is worth the momentous stress headache you're bound to receive. Now, let me be honest with all of you. Literally any of the Super Nintendo games based upon the original Star Wars trilogy could be on this list. Every single one of them retains similar gameplay styles, and the levels are modeled directly after movie scenes, and they will pound you into the dirt unmercilessly. If I had to pick one as the most noteworthy, I would say the original, Super Star Wars, would be on this list, due to the fact that the sequels have advancements that, while not making the games any easier, does give you more options to defend yourself. Super Star Wars was released in 1992 for the Super Nintendo by Sculptured Software and LucasArts. Gameplay consists of various scenes from A New Hope, which you control Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, or Chewbacca as they run and gun throughout each action stage. You have a limited amount of lives and continues, so being careful is the name of the game. But it's hard to be careful when enemies can be this relentless. You start out with just a blaster, but the lightsaber becomes available later in the game and helps out a lot against the various enemies. Sandwiched alongside these levels are land speeder levels, which require you to defeat enemies in Mode 7 graphics, and an X-Wing section to reenact the final bombing mission from the movie. All of these combine to create a satisfying yet frustrating experience that should be checked out by both fans of the movies and fans of difficult Super Nintendo games. But don't be surprised if you end up force pushing your cartridge out of a window. ActRaiser has had its phrases sung to the high heavens by now. What started out as an underrated gem has turned into an undeniable juggernaut on the Super Nintendo. But did you know ActRaiser had a sequel? And no, not the remake on Switch, ActRaiser 2. ActRaiser 2 was released on the Super Nintendo in 1993 by Quintet and Enix. You control God as he goes around the world slaying demons, bringing peace one sword strike at a time. Tanzra the demon was defeated before the game starts, but his intense hatred spawns several demons based upon his 7 deadly sins, who strike chaos in the world. God, or the Master as he is known by his angel subordinate, then descends into conveniently located statues that happen to have a sword and shield and wreck house. The big difference between this game and the previous one is there are no town simulator sections in the game, leaving only the action stages to fill in the gaps. And they fill in the gaps by beating you down and picking you back up to do it again. Unlike the previous game, you are more nimble in your movements, which allows the Master to glide and attack in more positions than before. You also gain a shield, which can block certain projectiles, and a limited amount of magic, which changes based upon the stance in which you use it. These help, but not outright lower the difficulty of clearing these levels. In particular, the enemies can require a lot more hits to destroy, and there are a lot more environmental hazards that can instantly take a life. You have unlimited continues and passwords, so you're completely helpless, but this only serves to get you back to the levels so they can do it again. ActRaiser 2 may not be as acclaimed as the previous game, but it is definitely a worthy addition to the Super Nintendo roster that may also cause the blood bristle to burst. Speaking of sequels that deserves a lot more attention than it's currently getting, why hasn't there been an Earthworm Jim game in years? I mean, yeah, we know exactly why, but we shouldn't let that eliminate the good games that we got, including this absolute terror. Earthworm Jim 2 was released in 1995 on the Super Nintendo, Genesis, Saturn, DOS, PlayStation, and the Game Boy Advance by Shiny Entertainment. You again control Jim across a variety of wacky levels, including pig tossing, rocket flying, and blind worm digging. You know, the usual. The original game wasn't exactly a trip through baby's first platformer, but the common theme in all the variety of levels is that you will die a lot. Besides the basic platforming levels that will test your patience, the amount of quick twitch action on the pocket rocket levels will stress your mental state real quick, on top of all the levels in which you use a gimmick exactly one level. Maybe if the game was a little more stable in just controlling Jim across a simple platforming stage, it would be a lot easier, but then again, it very well wouldn't be an Earthworm Jim game without it. You gotta take the weirdness with the rest, and with that, acknowledge that this game will grind on you down to the bone. And on the last stop of the hard NES game to hard Super Nintendo game pipeline, we have Contra making its grand debut on the big boy stage. Contra actually received a direct sequel on the NES called Super C, which was just as challenging as the original. So the third sequel on an upgraded machine definitely had its work cut out. Well, for all the insane people watching this video, I'm happy to tell you that this game fulfills all of that and more. Contra 3: The Alien Wars was released in 1992 For the Super Nintendo and Game Boy by Konami, you control Bill and Lance across 6 different side-scrolling run-and-gun levels of hellish war against the aliens. By war, I mean spraying and praying because enemies and projectiles come frequently and heavy. As with the previous Contra games, you get different weapons depending on the pickups you touch, as well as screen-clearing bombs that will help out when you get a little overwhelmed. Also like the previous Contra games, you die in one hit, so get ready to learn Death and Needs. Combine that with the limited amount of lives it continues, and you have a very short leash to try and make your way through. New to this game, replacing the base infiltration stages, are the overhead mode 7 stages that are honestly really difficult to control. People new to this will struggle to make any progress until they game over a couple of times. This is similar to the entire game, honestly. You'll continuously throw yourself at it, making chunks and chunks of progress each time, until you get to the promised land and beat the game. You'll feel so accomplished and feel like you can take on the world until you try for the true ending on a higher difficulty and get smacked right back down. Are there any other Super Nintendo games that should be on this list? Leave them in the comments below. Also, don't be afraid to follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/SleepyheadDree, where you might see me play one of these hard games. Hope everyone finds their inner peace from these games. Have a good one. Bye.